Orale, loco. Scuvo. What's up? OG Loco's back. Try to finish this thing today. Today, we're going to talk about, or I'm going to continue talking about the old family Reds taking their death. This is my Aztec skull. Taking their death. Yeah. Anyway, let some people load up. I tried to get this started yesterday. I haven't been on YouTube very much, so I'm trying to get back in the groove again. So I had a couple of topics I wanted to talk about, and this is one. I'm finishing the history lesson on the old family Red, so it'll be a good discussion. So yesterday I started talking about the history of the old family Reds, how they came about. And I got interrupted. It's hard to, man, it's being a busy person. It really is hard to carve out an hour of my day to do social media. But I think it's important to educate people on the OG local old family Reds and the history behind them, and for education entertainment purposes only. So OG local old family Reds are the best working game bred old family Reds in the world today. Okay, that's my claim. Been breeding them for over 35 years. They're family bred. These dogs are bulldogs. They're hunting dogs, hog hunting dogs. They bang. So, they're validated dogs. And so what we're trying to do is educate people that anybody that's interested in the old family Reds, are they still out there? Are they still in the are they still working? Are they still game? I guess those are the questions that always come up. There isn't a lot of them, to be honest with you. So I can see why there's a lot of questions. It's an old pit bull bloodline, probably over 100 years old now. If you go back to the original Irish imports from the 1800s, well over 100 years now. So it's an old bloodline, and the fact that you have them working today, and they're family bred. They go back to those original Irish dogs. They go back to the original Leitner old family Reds. They go back to the original Hemphill old family Reds, and they're still in existence today. Not only do they look like those original dogs did, but they also work like them. So that's pretty much what we're trying to educate people on. Let's see. So the purpose of this video today was to talk about the values. It was really something that came up on the values of society when this breed was developed, compared to today, and do we still value those things today? And do we still value how these dogs were bred and why they were bred? Now, these dogs were bred for dog fighting. That, it's a breed that was the registry was created for fighting dogs. Whether you agree with it or not, that's what it was, and that's the truth. So it's one of those purebred breeds, and the reason it's called American Pit Bull Terrier, it was a registry created here in the United States of America for American fighting dogs. Okay, so what we're going to talk about is the ingredients or the dogs that were used to create the American Pit Bull Terrier, how the breed was created as a pure breed, and how the registry would. Excuse me, I'm getting over a cold. So, and how the early pioneers of the breed, of the old family Reds, what they were breeding for, what the traits were, and why they were breeding for that way, and what were the claims that were made about this strain of American Pit Bull Terriers that's still valued today. Um, and what role do they play today? I guess those are the topics. So where I left off yesterday, I got to where Hempfield and McCoy were trying to find the last of the Leitner O family Reds. So you could watch the video from yesterday. I got to where Leitner left Louisiana, and then he went to Colorado, and he abandoned his old his red nose, old family red nose dogs, and he created a separate line of black nose Leitner dogs, totally different line of dogs. But the Leitner old family reds had already made a reputation as some of the best fighting dogs in America. So there wasn't a lot of them. And the story goes in like I think it was the 1920s. Bob Hempfield and Dan McCoy got in touch with Gaboon Trehan, and they went to find some of the last of the Leitner red-nosed dogs that they could validate and start breeding them again. Okay, so figure the Leitner dogs, he was breeding them and matching them probably from the 1800s to by 1920s, late 1920s, because Hempfield and McCoy went looking for them, and Hempfield claims he started breeding the Leitner old family reds in 1927. Okay, so that's where this story picks up. So the story is that Hempfield picked some of the dogs out from an old timer in Louisiana, old Frenchman named, I think it's named Boudreaux, something like that. They were able to acquire some of those Leitner red-nosed dogs and validate them as Leitner dogs and validate them as working game dogs. So so Hempfield took his to the Carolinas, and he started breeding them. He started family breeding them, and he at this point they're just called Leitner dogs, Leitner red-nosed dogs. But Dan McCoy, they were trying to pay tribute to the old Irish old family reds that came from Ireland in like the 1800s. So they called their Leitner, their family bred, line bred Leitner red-nosed dogs, old family red nose. And that's where the coin comes from. They coined that term, old family red nose. What they were really talking about are Leitner red-nosed dogs, but they call them old family red nose. So the Hempfield dogs are known as the old family red-nosed dogs. That's where that strain of Hempfield dogs that were line bred off those old Leitner red-nosed dogs, they started calling them old family red nose. So you have to understand there's a difference in terms here. Irish old family reds came from Ireland. They weren't pit bulls. They were like bull terrier mixes. They were just called old family reds because they had the recessive red trait. They were Irish fighting dogs. They had been bred in Ireland for hundreds of years. Leitner took some of those Irish old family reds. He blends them into his family of dogs to create the Leitner strain of the American Pit Bull Terrier. Leitner was one of the first early breeders of American Pit Bull Terriers in America. He matches dogs, and in those days you had to match a dog. It had to win to get UKC papers as a purebred pit bull. And then Hempfield picks up in the 20s and finds some of the last remnants of the Leitner red-nosed dogs. He starts family breeding those, and he calls his family old family red nose. So that's what we're talking about. So McCoy takes some of his dogs that when him and Hempfield went to Louisiana, he takes some of his dogs to the Texas Panhandle, and he farms them out to different breeders, Owens and a few other breeders down there in Texas. Same family of dogs, but the Texas dogs were not called Old Family Red-Nosed Dogs. They were just known as Leitner Red-Nosed Dogs. Okay, and a lot of those dogs, they're in the pedigree of like Ferguson Centipede and the Williams dogs, and Williams line bred him too, but he didn't call his Old Family Red-Nosed Dog because that was what Hemphill's line of Leitner dogs was called. He just called his Leitner Leitner dogs. Even Ferguson Centipede wasn't known as an Old Family Red-Nosed Dog. He was known as a Leitner dog when he became a champion, I think in the 1930s, 1940s. So even then, he was known as a Leitner dog. So Hemphill creates his family of Leitner dogs, and he calls them Old Family Red-Nose. And he starts matching his dogs, and they start performing very well, winning. And I think they were dominating the pit bull world match dogs. I think from like the 30s, 40s, and 50s. They were, about 30 years. They dominated it. And during this period in the 1950s, Hemphill starts advertising his dogs, Old Family Red-Nose. And in his publications, he's saying that when family bred, his dogs will take their death. And I want to talk about that term, will take their death. They were good family dogs. They were good with people, et cetera, but in battle, they would take their death. It was something he really prized, that trait in his Old Family Red-Nosed dogs. And he also advertised at that time, they were the gamest pit bulls ever bred. So he's talking about when the breed started in 1890 to about 1950. In that period of time, he was matching into the big time dog people at that time in the United States. So he knew them all. And he was proving his dogs that as the gamest ever bred. And I want to talk about that term. What did he mean, the gamest ever bred? So, taking their death. Let's talk about that. And you got to remember, this is a value, a warrior value. And the reason I want to talk about that warrior value, I don't know if we in society today we value warriors like we did in history. You took your death with honor, and that's what Hemphill was talking about. Because dogfighting back in those days, a lot of it was based on a warrior mentality, how a warrior would take their death in battle, like any warrior society. Okay, any warrior society, samurais is a good one. They'd rather die in battle than be dishonored. So that was the thinking. And they were also based on bare knuckle fighting at the time. So that's where you get the scratch line, and all the rules for dog fighting came from bare knuckle fighting back in the days. That's the scratch line and all the rules, and they took those rules and they applied them to dogfighting. And it was written, I think Bob Hemphill wrote the UKC fighting rules. So those were published at one time when UKC sanctioned dogfighting. I think they got out of it in the 1930s. But between 1890 and 1930s, they published rules for dogfighting, and that's how you got papers for your dogs. You had to match them. So I don't know if any other breed you actually had to fight your dog to get papers of purebred. I think most other breed registries were based on conformation, or some type of hunting trait. You had to go prove your dog in that field, and then that's how you got papers. And then you started breeding your dogs and creating that purebred line. So The pit bull, at least to my knowledge, is the only breed that I'm aware of. You actually had to fight dogs and win a match to get papers on them. And that was something up until 1975 was pretty accepted. Okay, when 1975 dogfighting became illegal. So prior to that, you could take an unregistered dog basically from the pound. I mean, off the street or off the pound. And you could take that dog, match it in 3 sanctioned fights. And if it won and became a champion, you can get papers on that dog. And you had to just submit the proof of the matches. You had to submit that there was a judge and an opponent and a weight, and there was a contract. And you would get papers if your dog was a proven champion in the pit, and it would just give you papers that said unknown sire and dam. Okay, that was pretty well accepted. And it just stayed with the trend that pit bulls were proven in the pit. That's how you had a pit bull, American Pit Bull Terrier. It was proven in the pit. And some of the great pit dogs, many of them didn't, you'll look at their papers in the early days and it'll show their papers of unknown sire or unknown dam or just unknown or import. Like they don't know it was an import. The sire and dam were an import, but the dog proved itself in the pit and it was able to get papers. So that's a fact. That's reality. So the early breeders were breeding these dogs for fighting and matching them. And it was, they were betting on them. So it's one of those breeds that the cream rose to the top, that only the best fighting dogs and winning fighting dogs were the ones that were being line bred off of. Because if you're going against the best, you want to use the best to compete against the best. Otherwise, you're throwing your money away. It was pretty much common sense. You wouldn't take a strain of dogs and go match into a top pit bull and just throw a bet at it, and you're just going to throw your money away because you're going to lose. So the fighters started like taking proven fighting dogs from like Leitner and Colby and Corcoran and Shipley and Feely. These guys were fighting dogs, matching dogs. And so the next generation, like the Hemphills and McCoy, they would use some of the proven fighting dogs and they would line breed off them. And that's sort of the way it's done through history and to where we're at today. So the Leitner Old Family Reds and the Hemphill Old Family Red-Nosed Dogs were a line of red-nosed dogs that were proven in the pit and highly respected and highly valued, and to where Hemphill advertised them as when family bred, they will take their death. And let's talk about that. What did he mean? Well, when family breeding is basically your line breeding off related dogs. So all his dogs pretty much were line bred off Leitner's Vic. Okay, so the Hemphill family red-nosed dogs were all line bred off the Leitner Vic dog. And they were related off Leitner's Vic. He had other crosses in there, but pretty much the dominant dog was Leitner Vic. So there was advertisements in the early days to have a true old family Hemphill old family red-nosed dog. It had to trace back to Leitner's Vic. And Leitner's Vic was a 12-time winner, one of the last and famous Leitner fighting dogs. So Hemphill line breeds these Leitner Vic dogs. He calls them Hemphill family red-nosed dogs. He's competing with them. And in the 1950s, he becomes a breeder, starts promoting them and saying these are dogs that they will take their death when family bred. And he was able to show that. Now, that goes back to the old warrior mentality. And I'll try to stay on track, keep it with dogs, but it also plays a role in society as a value. And they were breeding dogs that even in a losing or dying situation, they would continue to scratch and they would take their death. They wouldn't cry, they wouldn't whelp, they wouldn't jump the wall, they wouldn't run. Uh, they would just take their death, like a warrior's death. And that's what he prized the old family red nose on. They were game. They would just take their death, um, which is something that was a values prize in a warrior society for generations. Uh, and and the reason I'm saying that is I think in modern day society, most people won't take their death. They would rather snitch. They would rather save themselves and take their death. That's pretty obvious in today's society. Uh, but in those days, a true warrior took his death. He knew what he was getting involved with. He knew what he signed up for. He knew he was genetically, those dogs were bred to fight to the death because they were game, because they loved to fight. So a dog that would fight to the death or scratch to his death and just take his death was doing what he loved to do. It was a game dog. Win, lose, or draw, it was going to stay there and it would take its death if it had to. And that's what Hemphill was breeding. He never said his dogs were the greatest fighting dogs. Okay. And that's a separate subject. I'll try to touch on that. He said they were the gamest ever bred and would take their death when family bred. And that's a trait. That's a trait in pit bulls. What's different in a great fighting dog and then a deep game or dead game dog, to be a champion fighting dog or grand champion fighting dog, you have to be an excellent athlete. Gameness is only one element to being a great fighting dog. You got to have mouth, you have to have wind, you have to have intelligence, you have to have athletic ability, you have to have it all plus gameness. And gameness kicks in when you're pushed to the limit. You want to quit. You know, you should quit. You know, you're going to die. You're getting your ass whipped. You're done. You're exhausted. You have nothing left. You gave it all. But you dig deep in your heart and soul and you're not going to quit. And you'll even scratch to your death and you'll take your death if needed. So that's the gameness trait. And that's what Hemphill was advertising his dogs as. Gamest ever bred. What happened was he was pretty successful in the early years of dog fighting here in America. And it was more like a scratching game, that a lot of those matches were 2-3 hours and they would get into matching their dogs and then you would break them and you start scratching them. The dog that wouldn't scratch or it would quit because it wouldn't scratch no more was the loser. And the dog that kept scratching, meaning going over the scratch line, kept going and going, and even in a dying situation was a winner. So even a dying dog that scratched to its death and died could win a match, even though a better fighting dog, more athletic dog that was whipping his ass that just wouldn't scratch was viewed as a quitter. So many times you could have a winner that was not as good of a fighting dog, but was gamer, and he would scratch and win. So what happens in the 1950s, the Tudor Dibble dogs come on the play. And Tudor was one of those guys, he loved hard mouth. He liked dogs that stayed in hold, and he liked finishers, killers. So he was always looking for dogs like that. You know, that was Tudor's thing. He liked hard biting, hard mouth killers. And these Tudor Dibble dogs start hitting the pit bull scene in the 1950s, and they start killing everything. They're killing the Hemphill dogs, and the Hemphill dogs, who are a very game dog, did not have the tools to compete with the Tudor Dibble dogs. And the reason I'm saying that is even Hemphill toward the end of the 1950s and early 60s, he added Tudor Dibble blood to his old family red-nosed dogs for ruggedness and hard mouth. He said that because he needed that to compete with the Tudor Daibo dogs that his dogs were competing against. He needed that hard mouth, that finishing ability, the ruggedness, and those Tudor Daibo dogs were just wiping everybody out in the 50s, 60s. So um, that's where now the dog game sort of changes, where gameness and the scratching game uh, was the dominant, but now you have these new killers that are taking you out and killing you long before gameness kicks in. So you get a dog that's a killer that can get in there and kill you fast and hard mouth. You'll never test gameness because that dog will kill you before you could ever even get, or to where even gameness has to come into play. They're just exceptional athletes. They were just like the Mike Tysons of the dog world at that time. They were just killing everybody. So that was where you see the old family red nose starts losing popularity. Bob Hemphill dies in 1960s. He was breeding his dogs with 40 years when he died. Um, and you have these new Daibo dogs that came online, and the popularity of the old family red nose went down. And they started crossing those old Hemphill, those old Leitner dogs, and the Williams dogs with the Daibo dogs, and that created the modern families we have today. So there's a lot of families of dogs that we have today that are basically genetically their old family red-nosed Daibo crosses. If you go back far in your pedigree, you could see where they took an old family red nose and bred it on a line bred Daibo dog, and that's where you get the Tombstone dog. That's where you get the Bolio dog. That's where you get the Carver's Black Widow, Carver's Judy dogs. That's where you get the Lonzo dogs. All those were Daibo family red crosses. And they either use the Williams blood off the Leitner old family reds, or they use the Hemphill blood off the Hemphill old family red nose to cross on the Daibo dogs. And there's more families than that. Even Jocko. Jocko was a Daibo old family red cross. Red Boy, assuming you believe his pedigree, there's no Daibo in there, but definitely old family red. His pedigree shows he had some old family red, not a whole lot in him, mostly Colby, but he also had some Ross Red Devil in there. But it is obvious that the Red Boy dogs carry the recessive red nose trait like the Hemphill old family reds, the Leitner old family reds, and they have very similar traits. And you gotta remember, Red Boy came on the scene in the 70s, so almost like 30 years after the Hemphill dogs. And the story goes that Red Boy was allegedly, he was in the same area as Hemphill right before Hemphill died. So whether he was a pure Hemphill dog or he was had Hemphill blood in him, that's the big debate. But if you look at the traits of the Red Boy dogs, when family bred, okay, and that's where family breeding, it tells the truth. When you are using genetics in a family and you're doubling up, tripling up, genetics don't lie. Papers lie. But if you start producing traits that those recessive traits through family breeding are going to show strong in your dogs. And the Red Boy dogs are very similar to the Hemphill old family red-nosed dogs. Very game, very long-winded. Many of those early Red Boy dogs took their deaths. They used to call them stupid game, especially when they were very tightly family bred. They just kept coming. They just kept coming. They just kept coming, and they'd get killed in the pit. And that's why they cross them on the Jocko and the Jeep blood, because that added the athletic ability, the mouth, and the finishing ability to those Red Boy dogs. And you got a better dog. Now you had a dog that had it all. You had a dog that had mouth, ability, with the deep gameness and the long wind. And that's where you get the Grand Champion Yellow and the blackjack dogs and the tap dogs, and all that came into play. Um, so when you look at the old family reds, I think that's something to think about is what did what was Hemphill breeding for? What were the Lightner dogs known for? And you'll see a lot of Lightner dogs in the old Ed Crenshaw dogs too. Um, they were just very game dogs. Um, and I'll try to wrap this story up. I was going to make this one quick. Very game dogs. There's a story. There was a convention, I believe, in Oklahoma in 1930, and Bill Lightner was already old and retired, and he had already created his two families. He had the old Lightner red-nosed dogs, and he had the new Lightner black-nosed dogs. The Lightner red-nosed dogs were for when he was breeding in Louisiana. The Lightner black-nosed dogs came later when he was breeding in Colorado. So at the big convention in Oklahoma, I think in the 1930s, that Bob Hemphill matches Wallace's Cersei Jeff, which was line bred off the Lightner red-nosed dogs, and into Runyon's, I think Runyon's Imp, or Imp 2. And Runyon's Imp 2 was off of the Lightner black-nosed dogs from Colorado. So it was the big convention where you're taking the old Lightner red-nosed dogs, and the first time they had really matched at a convention into the new Lightner black-nosed dogs. So Bob Hemphill's handling Wallace's Cersei Jeff, a renowned killer, off the red-nosed line, and Earl Tudor's handling Runyon's Imp off the Lightner black-nosed dogs, and they go at it. And Lightner basically was watching at the convention. He just said both those lines were as game as he ever bred, and they were both quality. He didn't really take a side, but he just said, like, you know, he was one of the great breeders. He took two separate families and created two lines of pit bulls, and they were competing at the very highest level. So that showed his genius as a breeder. As a breeder, he knew how to breed pit bulls, game pit bulls, winning pit bulls at the highest level. So I'll wrap the story up, and then I'll try to answer some questions real quick. So at the convention, obviously, Bob Hemphill, he's young, he's handling Wallace and Cersei Jeff. Cersei Jeff kills Runyon's Imp, okay? And Earl Tudor was handling Runyon's Imp. But this is where the term dead game comes from, okay? So Bob Hemphill, they say, was cocky, and he was drinking a lot, and probably talking a lot of shit to Earl Tudor, I assume. That was what was going on. And at the end of the match, Runyon's Imp is dead in the pit. Okay, he's lifeless. He's just laying there. So they break off Cersei Jeff, and the match was called. Cersei Jeff wins. So Bob starts talking shit to Earl Tudor. He goes, I bet you my dog was scratched to a dead dog, because it's very, in those days, and even today, to have a live dog scratch to a dead dog and take hold is a dog that was viewed as a very game dog, a dog with high prey drive, that no matter if it's live or dead, he's going to scratch to it. They're just going to go scratch and take hold. They don't care if it's alive or not. That's how high their prey drive was. And so what Hemphill was trying to show up Earl Tudor at the convention in front of everybody, because everybody and anybody who was there was seeing this, he bets him. Takes Cersei Jeff and releases him. Cersei Jeff scratches to the dead Runyon's Imp and takes hold. Okay, yeah, proves his point. He has a dog that'll scratch to a dead dog. Everyone applauds. Yeah. Earl Tudor was not going to be one up by Bob Hemphill at a convention. So he picks up the dead Runyon's Imp, and he takes him in the corner, and he starts preaching, like, like doing a sermon over the dead dog. And Runyon's imp comes out of the corner, stumbling and rolling, crosses the scratch line and takes hold of Cersei Jeff and dies. He takes hold and then he dies. He expired. And then Earl Tudor, in front of everybody, tells Bob Hemphill, "You just showed me a live dog that would scratch to a dead dog." He goes, "I just showed you a dead dog that would scratch to a live dog." Coined the term dead game, a dog that would scratch to its death, and did. And whether that was ever seen prior to 1935, it may have been the first time something like that was ever seen at a big convention where they took a dead dog and it came back to life and scratched to its death. But Earl Tudor did that and demonstrated dead gameness. And everyone was applauded because even in a losing situation, people value a warrior's death, taking their death, even if you're losing, even if you know you're going to die, and even if you got beat by a superior athlete. The fact that Runyon's imp came back from the dead and scratched to his death was respected by everyone. They all got up and applauded. And that was the value back then, a warrior's death, taking your death. And that's what these dogs were bred for. That's where gameness comes from. It's a dog that would continue to fight. It will take its death, and like a warrior, like a warrior's death. So that's the story. I wanted to wrap that up. I wanted to talk about a little bit of history on the Irish Old Family Reds were blended into the Lightner red-nosed dogs, which were then blended into the Hempfield Old Family red-nosed dogs, which are then blended into the OG Loco Old Family Reds that I have today. So all my dogs, my pure stuff at least, that's been family bred, heavily line bred on the Hempfield Old Family red-nosed dogs, which all go back to the early Lightner dogs and the Lightner Vic dogs. So very high percentages. So we have them family bred in a pure form. They're all related. They're all working. They're all game. I do have crosses. I do blend in other blood. Like I got some crosses with some Mayday and some Chinaman and some Red Boy. I might be doing some crosses with some Cheap Red Boy Rascal soon. And then I have friends and they do their own crosses, like with Lonzo. And you need that little genetic out, like Bob Hemphill was doing, to keep them working at a high level. You can keep the pure dogs are great. You want good working pure dogs that have very strong traits that can pass that on to the next generation. But when you're breeding pure, you're going to lose traits too. So like Hemphill did, he bred pure and he had very game dogs, but they were lacking mouth, ruggedness, and finishing ability, and they couldn't compete in the fast lane with the Daibo dogs. So that's why he had to do some outcrosses. And that's true of any breeder. If you're not adding new blood to make your dogs better, you're going to lose working traits. So if you're trying to breed all around hog hunting dogs or all around working dogs that have it all, mouth, wind, gameness, athletic ability, you have to look at other bloodlines of American Pit Bull Terrier that have those traits, and then you blend them into your dogs. So by introducing new genes, you get new genes in your gene pool, and you breed that back into your family. So like right now I have some Old Family Reds that are 7/8 pure OG Loco and 1/8 out Mayday. I'll breed them to one of my pure males, and then you increase the percentages of the pure OG Loco blood in them. And what you really want to do, like every 4 or 5 generations, that out gets so small, you need to do another outcross. So by the time you think you get to 5th generation or 6, you're like pretty much back to a pure dog again, because the out that you added to your genetics is so small, like 1/32nd out. That means 1 in 32 dogs in that pedigree was the out. The other 31 or 32 were all related. We're all family bred. So it becomes an evolutionary process that, you breed your dogs, you keep the best working, you keep the best of the best working. I always say keep the best, fuck the rest. And then you build off that, and then you look at other bloodlines and you introduce those genes into your gene pool, and then you breed it back into your family. You repeat the process. So we will, like in 4 or 5 generations, I'll have dogs, I'll have a little red boy in them, pretty much pure OG Loco blood, a little Chinaman in them, pretty much pure OG Loco blood, a little bit Mayday in them, and pretty much pure OG Loco blood. And I don't know how much longer I could breed pure before I start losing working ability and I start having genetic problems. So I might be able to go another generation or 2 of breeding pure to pure, but I'm getting pretty close that I've been breeding pure to pure so long, 35 years, that I don't know how much longer I could continue to do it without sacrificing health issues and its working abilities of my old family red. So that's the thinking. And we're creating new strains too. So even though they're OG Loco dogs, I'm now going to start breeding pure the Mayday old family red crosses, and in 3 or 4 generations, they'll all be related, and they'll become the Mayday old family red family of dog, OG Loco family red family of dog. Similar, like you have pure red boy, and then you got pure red boy, Jocko red boy Jocko dogs. Okay, slightly different, but they're both pure families, even though they're related. They started breeding the red boy Jocko, the Jeep red boy, and those became. You used to have pure like Jeep. Now you have pure Jeep red boy. Now you have pure Jeep red boy rascal dogs. It's the same thinking, but the reason they added those bloods to those pure families was to keep them working at a very high level, and then you keep family breeding them and you create a pure substrain of your family. Basically, it's like a family tree. Everybody is related on the core, on the roots, and the trunk of the tree, but you have different branches on that tree that are related, but have little bit of outs in different families, but they're all related, basically. So let's see. Let's see. Hey, I had to put your mind. Let's see. Nice, nice. All good history. Yeah, right on. Right on. Let's see. I didn't, nothing really for me to answer. Um, People always ask, do I have pups? Yeah, I have pups. you know, I don't, I mean, I do sell to the public, but I don't breed that often and I don't sell to anybody. Okay. Uh, I'm very, you know, and I'm going to be frank with everybody, is in today's society, you can't trust nobody. I'm not looking to get caught up with somebody or get caught up with anybody or get caught up with people I don't know because I trusted somebody. So at this point, I'm breeding my own family dog. I'm trying to breed the best dogs possible. Um, and most of the time, most of my dogs are kept on my yard or they go to friends that I'm working with, and we breed dogs and we trade back and forth. But I've known them for, a while. We've been doing business for a while. Anyone new, you know what? It's sort of like, am I introducing drama into my life that I don't need? That becomes part of the vetting process. Is you got to get to know somebody. Are they legit? Are they snitches? Are they just trying to make something out of nothing? I mean, all those factors come into play. Are they thieves? All those things come into play. So you really want to find quality people, a good character that one value the OG Loco dogs. You got to value them. You have to want an OG Loco dog. If you don't want an OG Loco dog, there's no reason to contact me. But if you really want an OG Loco dog, then get to know me and let me know what you're about. And then, you start off with a cross. Crosses are going to be cheaper because I do a lot of test breeding and we're just sort of trying things out. And we want to do a cross and see how that dog works. And we want to give them into working yards, people that are hog hunting and working them or hunting them, and get feedback. Was that a good cross? Did it click? Were the percentages high? And then that tells me as a breeder to do it again or build off those dogs. And that's where newcomers come into play. Is if you're somebody that wants to try an OG Loco dog, you can get a cross, especially on a first time breeding, pretty reasonable. And when I mean reasonable, probably $750 to $1,000 for the pup with ADBA paper, shopped, some worming, and then you just pay for transport. I don't let no one come to my yard. Strangers, I don't know you. It's just it's a private yard, but we do use professional, licensed, insured transporter that get these dogs anywhere in the United States. So pretty reasonable too. I think average is $600 shipping cross country. So think of it that way. Budget. If you could budget $1,500, let's say that's your budget for a dog. That includes purchasing the dog and getting it transported, and the dog comes with papers and shots and worming. If you could budget $1,500, you could probably get an OG Loco dog. But once you get in and you prove yourself as someone who works these dogs and works them to the highest level, then you get access to the pure stuff that we would work with you to get you a pure one to breed into the cross. And then hopefully we could get something back from you off that makes the bloodline, makes the OG Loco dogs better. And that's the goal here, is we want to make them better. And how do we make them better? And we have to keep improving the blood, the genetics, the working abilities. A big evaluation is, what does the sire and dam breed bring to the table? And then hopefully they complement each other and we get better puppies, but thinking's like that. So it takes time. Let's see. Any other questions? Yeah, Colby was an Irishman, actually. A lot of people don't know that. A lot of people think he's an Englishman because he did use a lot of English blood in his dogs, but you got to think of it this way. The United Kingdom, they were all England, Ireland, Scotland was all United Kingdom, and they were all sharing dogs and bloodlines and matching dogs over in the old world prior to coming to the new world in the United States in like the 1800s. USA is not that old of a country. So you think of it that way. But Colby was an Irishman. He did use Irish blood. His early dogs were Irish. Some were Irish imports, and that's why Leitner used those Irish imports off the Colby blood and crossed them on his Leitner Vic blood to create the Leitner line of dogs. So you'll see, like in the early days, the pioneers, a lot of those dogs are related. Colby, Leitner, Feely, Corcoran. There just wasn't a lot of pit bulls back in those days. It was a new breed, and not everybody was into fighting dogs. So there was, just they all knew each other because they were all matching into each other. And then, if you match into somebody, there was a lot of, if I lost to you because you had a superior dog, I'd buy your dog off you and I would breed it to my dog. So there was a lot of that going on, a lot of stealing. A lot of the old timers did steal each other's dogs. Earl Tudor and Carver were notorious for stealing dogs. So that's just the ugly part of the breed, sort of why I don't let people come to my house. Like, come on now, I ain't gonna invite strangers to my house. But yeah, dog stealing uh, was one of those things that was rampant in the pit bull community. Um, I think it still goes on today. Um, but back in those days, I mean, your friend stole your dog. I mean, those were the things that happened because they were competing with each other and they were looking for the best blood. And you could go through history. A lot of famous dogs were stolen and bred off of with different pedigrees. Um, Pit General, um, Art. Uh, who else was stolen? A lot of Eli was stolen. A lot of those early famous dogs were stolen by other people that were in the dog game, and they would breed off them because they wanted the best. So they got those dogs and they bred off them to produce good dogs. So that's what happened. Whether you like it or not, that's the truth. Let's see. You know what? Here's my warning to people. Okay. Uh, on if you're looking for old blood, is any of this old stuff still around? Probably, maybe. I don't know. The question you need to ask is any of this old blood game tested and working today, family bred. Okay. There's a lot of people that bred for show. I think that was one of the things that happened with the old family reds, why they got a bad reputation. Um, After Hemphill died, Wilder took over and he was breeding more for preserving the Hemphill line. He wasn't breeding for a working dog no more. So a lot of those dogs went to show yards and they were just breeding for the pedigree. Oh, look, I have the purest Hemphill blood. And a lot of them were beautiful dogs. I mean, beautiful red nose with the gold eyes and red toenails. And a lot of show people got them and started breeding these dogs for the show ring, but they were no longer testing them and working them and hunting them, and they weren't checking them for gameness. So what happened, these dogs became a shell of their old Leitner and Hemphill blood. They looked like them, but they were nowhere near the quality of the Leitner and Hemphill dogs because they weren't tested, they weren't hunted, they weren't worked. And I always hear that from people. Well, old family reds, the ones I saw just weren't any good. They quit on a hog. Da, 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 da. But you got to look at who bred them and what was their program. It could have been a program off a breeder that was just preserving them and not testing and working them and hunting them. Or it could have been a breeder that bred them for the show ring and wasn't picking dogs for hunting, gameness, and working. So you really got to understand who the breeder was. And the question is, are those dogs working and hunting today? Are they representative of the old Leitner and Hemphill dogs that were game match dogs back in 100 years ago? So that's really the question you need to ask. And that's true of not only the old family red dogs or the Colby dogs, that's true of any breeder. There are, for instance, I use Chinaman blood. I have used Chinaman and Mayday blood to blend into mine. I didn't pick any Chinaman blood or any Mayday blood. I picked proven working blood off Chinaman and proven working blood off Mayday, but and even my Red Boy stuff, proven working blood off Red Boy stuff, because even in those families, you have some that are bred preserving, not really working in gameness. Some that are bred for the show ring, but not really working in gameness. I wanted the strains of Chinaman, Mayday, and Red Boy, and even my new dog, who's the Jeep Red Boy Rascal, that came off proven working dogs that were game dogs. So, like for instance, I use 2 Chinaman bloods in my dogs. One is off the Garner chemo blood. Okay, so chemo was one of the better producing Chinaman dogs that produce high caliber game working dogs. Okay, it's a proven fact. Chemo's probably one of the most underrated modern day Chinaman dogs producing. But if you got chemo blood, it's highly valued. If you have Garner chemo blood and you're trying to produce working dogs, it's probably one of the better, in my opinion, Frisco line dogs, the chemo dogs. And there are proven producers. So I have some of that chemo blood. I also have some Chinamen off the Earl Jr., the Epinette Earl Jr., which has no Frisco blood. That again was another proven Chinaman line, very game, well respected line. The Earl Jr. blood is known for producing very game dogs. So I have that Earl Jr. blood in some of my dogs. On the Mayday stuff, I use the Melkamp Michael Myers blood, which is basically off the old Mayday Grand Champion Buck blood. And that blood was a proven working line that I have. And then my Red Boy stuff came off of the Banks Heat Maker, which is the old Holland's Heat Maker dogs. Okay, very well respected, well known Red Boy line that I blended into my old family Reds. And my Jeep Red Boy Rascal bitch that I have comes off a very well respected Grand Champion, Crenshaw's Grand Champion Blackjack line off two of his sons, off of Champion Brick and Champion Woodall's Weird Jack. So when I'm looking at families, I'm looking at families of a working line to blend into my working old family Reds. So I think if you use that logic with any breeder, what you want, if you truly want a game working, hog hunting dog that's going to get in there, mix it up, high prey drive, and will take their death, you got to go to a breeder that breeds that way and that uses his dogs in a working, for a working purpose. If they're not bred for a working purpose, then it could set you back genetically. Because here's always my big question with people. Well, I see the pedigree, but how do you know that one you use was a working pup in that litter? Because not all the pups are going to work. That's a fact. Is you're going to have some cold dogs, you could have cur dogs, you could have very game dogs in one litter. If you don't test your dogs as working dogs and they're not pushed to see if they have the working trait, you could pick the one dog that's a cold dog or the one dog that's a cur dog, and you could start breeding off it because the pedigree looks good. And that's always the big gamble. When you're dealing with new people and you don't know their program, is like it could set you back generations by introducing a line of dogs into your line that's not off proven working stock. So that's always the big risk if you're breeding working hunting dogs. You want dogs that come off dogs that are proven hunting working dogs. Let's see. Do you think them show dogs could be bred back to a working? Yeah, I mean, let me tell you what I did. Okay. And I'll tell you my logic. American Pit Bull Terriers. Let's take a worst case scenario. Let's say you breed two curs together, dogs that just are not, they're going to quit, they're not game, but they come off proven working lines, proven game lines. They didn't get that gameness from their pedigree. Okay. They're just not represented the pedigree. So let's say you breed that. Okay. It doesn't mean gameness goes away. What it means is the percentages of gameness goes down. So the dogs still somewhere have the game gene in them. It could be like 1%, one in like 100 dogs is the game one. That's the gene. And the way genes work is sire dams, you want them, it's a random selection. You're hoping they line up and click. And let's say the recessive game gene a cur dog lines up with a recessive game gene in another cur dog, and just by random selection and luck, those two game genes line up and click. That's your one dog that's game. And that could be 1 in 100. Okay. But then if you do that, that's why I say pick the best, fuck the rest. You want to line breed off that one dog. It's like you don't want to use anything else that wasn't proven game off that line, because your percentages are going to be so low. So yes, you could take some show dogs that are off game, old game working dogs, but you're going to breed a lot of dogs, and you're going to cull a lot of dogs to find that 1 in 100 that genetically is representative of its own genes. And you have to be committed to doing that. So let me tell you my story. I think I was down to 2 dogs in 2008, 2009. Yeah, I had already been breeding like 25 years. And my dogs were bulldogs. They were game dogs. I knew that. And I was going to get out of them. And I think I've told the story before. Owning game working dogs is a big responsibility. I buried a lot of dogs that killed each other in yard accidents. They get loose and they're going to kill each other. And, you raise these dogs and you love these dogs and their family. And, you sort of get tired. You get tired that, I buried a lot of dogs, a lot of good dogs too, like good ones. So, about 2009, I was sort of like done. I was like, you know what? I've had these dogs for a while. I'm going to let my last two live out, and I'm done breeding. I was just going to be done. Do other things in life. And then I took like a year or two off. And then I decided, well, you know what? This bloodline dies with me. These OG Loco dogs die with me. So if I don't start breeding them and getting them into the right hands, that's it. There's no more OG Loco dogs. And I had already spent like 20 years building my family of dogs. So I went out and I said, okay, I need to find me a good brood bitch to breed to OG Bull. OG Bull was a straight up serial killer. Okay. Proven game dog, a killer. I mean, killed everything. If Bull got loose, he killed whatever he could. Okay. So I already knew that with Bull. So I already knew I had that dog on my yard, a proven game dog, hunting dog, hog hunting dog, a killer. So I was looking for a female to breed to him and start line breeding off Bull, but I wanted a female that had off proven working bloodlines similar to Bull's, because I wanted to keep them in the same family. So OG Bull was off my old Hemphill Wilder, Hemphill Klaus blood. And he had a little bit of OFBA in him, Old Family Bulldog Association blood, off the Copperhead, OFBA Copperhead, and some Wilder Red Satan. So he had a lot of Wilder Red Satan blood in him. So I started looking for a female, and I found a brood bitch that was off of OFBA's Auto Rocket. Okay, I knew the dog. Auto Rocket was by OFBA's Copperhead. Bull's grandpa was OFBA's Copperhead. So there was the common ancestor. On paper, genetically, she should have clicked with Bull. But to be honest with you, she was not. She was just a brood bitch. Okay. So the way gameness works, rule of thumb, if the dogs were game working dogs within 3 generations, and you're testing them and you're working them, then you get influence from the grandparents. When you start going beyond grandparents, if those dogs haven't been looked at, worked, or hunted, or tested, your percentages start dropping. So you start losing gameness. So rule of thumb is, as long as the grandparents or great grandparents were proven working hunting dogs, their genetic influence through testing and culling should pass on to the grandpups, great grandpups. But beyond that, your percentages start really dropping. So you really got to be careful. You try to say like genetically, I'm looking for dogs within 3 generations. We're proven working on dogs, and that's why going to a breeder that works and hunts and tests their dogs becomes important. That at least you're starting off with a program that these dogs were worked, hunted, and tested. Okay, so that's the thinking. So I knew this female I got, which was Ellison, no bones about it, was off of Otto Rocket. Otto Rocket was a champion show dog. He was conformation champion and a weight pull dog. But the breeder was not a working person. She was a UKCA judge, so she bred more for the conformation side. But what I was banking on was Otto Rocket sire, Copperhead, and those dogs behind Otto Rocket were all working hunted tested dogs from the OFBA. So I knew that because I knew the guys from OFBA when I was down in Southern California. So I knew their program. I knew their standard. I knew the type of dogs they bred. So my thinking was, okay, if I buy this female, even though she herself was not really a great working dog, my thinking was breeding her to OG Bull, who's a proven killer, that I was going to get something. But I knew my percentages were going to be low. But I was willing to take the chance as a breeder that I'll breed them and I'll really test the pups hard and keep the best, out of that. And it worked. Okay. Bones was actually a good family dog, and she was a great working dog. She just wasn't, I don't know, she wasn't a hunting dog. Okay. But she produced killers when bred to bull. So that was the crazy part. When bred to OG Bull, she produced, I think in the 2 times I bred her, 2-3 times I bred her, she produced killers. So in hindsight, she was a great producer for me. Okay. Even though herself wasn't the best working hunting dog. And her daughters became better producers than their mom. So I got a dog today. She's a straight up killer, Cajun Belle. Okay. Like a male. She probably took more after OG Bull. She acts very much like OG Bull. No nonsense. She's going to grab whatever she can. She's going to hunt. But she is a granddaughter or great granddaughter of Bones. Okay. So she carries Bones' blood, but she's probably 50 times better than her great grandma as a hunting working dog. But it wasn't easy to get Cajun Belle. It was like it took generations. It took a lot of selective breeding. It took a lot of finding the best. And now I'm line breeding off everything off Cajun Belle because she has all the traits of the type of old family red female. Like I captured it. Okay. Now that I captured it in her, I'm line breeding off her because she has the type. She's the type of old family red that I wish I started with. But it took me 3-4 generations to get there. So going back to your question, yes, but you got to be committed. You got to set a very high standard, and you're probably going to go through a lot of dogs to get that one dog. And unfortunately, most people will quit and give up. They won't stick with it. They'll just say, you know what, this cost me a lot of money, a lot of time. I'm not getting what I want. And then they'll give up and go to a different bloodline that's higher percentages, like some of the other, like the Red Boy lines or the Mayday lines or the Chinaman lines, which, you could go to, if you get one from a good breeder, the percentages of getting a working dog out of those lines is much higher because one, it's a newer line, and two, more recent line of dogs that's working and hunting. The old blood, you got to remember, these dogs were hunting and working and match in the 40s, 50s, and 60s. So the fact that you could keep them working today requires a big commitment. But what we do see is the blood, when bred pure, when uh, they're working, they're game, uh, and you cross it on a Daibo bred dog, like a Chinaman, an alligator, a Mayday, something that has very heavy Daibo breeding, you get a better dog. I mean, going back to what Hempfield and all those other early breeders, those Daibo genetics click with these old Hempfield Leitner blood. Okay, so that's a fact. And we're proving that today. We're getting better dogs when I outcross on heavily line bred uh, dogs have heavy Daibo genetics in them. You get the hard mouth, you get the finishing ability, you get the athleticism of those Daibo dogs crossed with the intelligence and the deep gameness of the old family reds. And like my dog OG Loco's Corvino today, he's 3/4 old family OG Loco family red, 1/4 Chinaman double bred chemo on the bottom. But to me, genetically, he is a modern day representation of the old Daibo family red crosses, because genetically that's what you see in his pedigree. Heavy Hempfield Leitner breeding in the old family red, and heavy Daibo breeding in the Chinaman chemo dogs. Okay, so genetically it just worked. Let's see what else we got here. Do you think? Let's see. So that. I know most of the old family red breeders. I don't really comment on other breeders. I was like, you do you, man. It may not be for me because I have my own program. It just means you do you. They're just not dogs that would fit into my program on the type of dogs I'm working with. So let me give you a little bit of background. I purified the OG Loco dogs for 35 years, and I put a lot of blood, sweat, and tears and hard work to get a very game working old family red dog that has high percentage of the old Leitner Hempfield blood in them. Okay. So when I was looking at outcrosses, okay, I was like, what to keep my dogs working, as I do hunt with my dogs and I send a lot out to hog hunting. I needed those dogs that were gonna work at a very high level. They were gonna get in there, they were gonna bang, and they're not gonna hesitate. And they would take their death if needed to. That was the program I was trying to breed for. Um, so I remember a few years back, I was like, do I go to another old family red program and introduce those genes into my dog? Or do I go to proven working lines like Red Boy, Mayday, and Chinaman? And, there I was at a crossroads, on how I move forward. And my thinking was, I don't need another red dog in my yard that doesn't work, or doesn't hunt, or is not game. I have enough red dogs. So adding more old family red blood to my line from a different family, I didn't feel would make my dogs better, because I had already brought my dogs to the top of the old family red uh, strain. Okay, so where do I go now? And my decision was, it would be better in the long run to keep them working at a very high level by introducing the Red Boy, Mayday, and Chinaman blood into my dogs versus introducing other families of old family red. Okay, and that's why I chose not to do it. Um, and the reason being is, one is many of the old family red dogs out there uh, don't come from working programs. Okay, that was a clear one. It was like, well, you don't test, you don't hunt, your dogs aren't validated. They're nice, pretty dogs, great pedigrees, but they're not really bred for hunting. Okay, they're not really bred for gameness. Um, for my program, it made no sense because it would set me back. Uh, so that was one of the reasons. Uh, But two, you really need to work with breeders that have been doing this like 20, 30 years. Okay. Most of these old family reds, and I think this is what hurts the community of old family reds, it's easy to phenotypically breed an old family red. Okay. And let me explain that. Anybody can go buy two red-nosed dogs with, they're dark red with the red nose and the gold eyes and the red toenails. They have the pedigree, heavy Hempfield. I'm going to breed these two dogs, and I'm going to produce red-nosed dogs with red toenails and gold eyes. It's going to have Hempfield on both sides. That's easy. So you get a lot of newcomers that they see $1, Hey, it's like, hey, I could breed these old family reds and I can sell them for a couple $1,000. And I'm going to have all these red-nosed dogs that look like the old Hempfield dogs. And that's what hurts. But most of these people are new. When I mean new, they're probably under 10, 15 years of breeding the program. And they're probably not breeding for a working dog, okay? A game-tested working dog. So that's what hurts the old family red nose community. It is easy for newcomers to come in and mass produce these dogs and sell them and market them. Look, these are exactly how the history books are. They're heavy in that. And that, so your percentages of breeders that have been doing it, let's say 30 years or better, many of them died off or they're just out of it. There's very few breeders that have a family of dogs, of old family reds, that they've been breeding, testing, and working in, and that they're game and proven for more than 30 years in the world today. And you can sort of see that and you're looking at pedigrees and how those dogs are bred. When you look at the pedigree, if you look at 8 generations, look at 4 generations. Let's look at 4 generations. Is the same breeder's name on top and bottom of those dogs, and are they all line bred off old family reds? Okay, that's a real good question. Or is the pedigree going to be 3 or 4 different breeders that are in that pedigree that all go back to the old Hempfield, Geronimo, Red Dixie dogs? So somebody took like 3 or 4 different breeders of old family reds and started mixing them. So they're not family bred. They're just mixing them, and you can see that they weren't doing it for generations. So that becomes the issue of when you're looking at these dogs is how long have you been doing it, or did you just get into it? And then the question is, why are you breeding them? What are you breeding for? That's a common question for anybody. Why do you have these dogs? Why are you breeding them? And what are you trying to achieve? Every breeder should have a vision and a goal for the type of dogs they're trying to produce. My vision and my goal when I got started back in the early 90s was I didn't just want to breed a game pit bull because I had access to Jeep and all those other lines. I had a lot of friends. They had those dogs. I could have easily got those dogs and bred them. But because I was passionate about the old family red dogs, I wanted something different. Okay. It was a commitment. It was a hobby. It was a lifestyle. I wanted to breed a very rare old bloodline of pit bulls and get them back to a high working game status. Okay. So that was my vision when I got started in my early 20s. It wasn't just breeding game pit bulls. It was breeding a game old family red-nosed pit bull that was heavy in the old Leitner Hempfield blood, but also was working at those same levels that set me apart from everyone else that was doing it. And that's what became the lifelong goal and vision as a breeder. So most people that come to me, know my program, know that I breed hog hunting dogs and working dogs and hunting dogs, and they've seen them and they're using them to like, hey, I like to cross some of my Tombstone Bolio into your working old family reds, or some of my working, like the Eli dogs, into some of your old family reds. So because what they're doing is doing exactly what I was doing in the reverse. They wanted an old family red, but they just didn't want any old family red. They wanted old family red from a breeder that's working in hunting and testing his dogs for hunting. And those dogs are proven working dogs that are heavy in that old Lightner Hempfield blood. Oh, let's see what else we got here. Alistair, how do you go back to incorporate your blood? A half brother, half sister, doubling up on the dam, or do you just go? Thanks for answering. Um, so all my dogs, all my pure stuff goes back to OG Bull and Ellison's No Bones About It when I started breeding again in 2009. 2000, no, 2000, yeah, 2010, 2011. Um, so all of them, they're all related. Okay, there's no outs. Okay, they're all going to go back one way or another to the Bull Bones dog. So uh, when I started creating the OG Loco line of Bull and Bones, I did several things. One is I bred brother to sister, and I created a pure line off of brother sister breeding. I bred son to mom, and I created a pure line off of son to mom breeding. I bred sire to daughter, and I created a line off of sire to daughter breeding. So I had all these dogs that all went back to Bull and Bones in different combinations. And then I started breeding those pups together. So they were all pure family out of the Bull's Bones breeding, but in different combinations. So, like some of my dogs today, they're going to have the OG Jew and Scooby blood, which is basically OG Bull bred back to his daughter Lulu. Okay, Lulu was off Bulls and Bones. So that becomes the sire daughter line, okay, in my dogs. My dogs will also have the OG Cradles bred to Stort's Delilah, which were brother sister off of OG Bull and Allison's No Bones About It. So that becomes the brother sister line. And then we have my dogs today will also have OG Ruger bred back to his mom, Allison's No Bones About It, and that becomes the mother son line. And all those dogs are now in my current dogs, and they're pure over 4 or 5 generations because they're all related. Because Lulu was a littermate to Kratos and Ruger, and OG Jew was a 3/4 brother to them out of Lulu, who was a sister to Kratos and Ruger. And then when you look at it, they're all related. It's a very, very pure genetic family of dogs. So, yeah, that's what you get. Then when you get, like I was saying earlier, I'm pretty tight now. I'm probably going to breed like Scarface to Gingerbread, and they're both in that family. So no outs. That'll create pure line. I know we got some pure stuff off of friends that are doing the guy in Canada who bought Lady in Red off me. He's going to breed her to Cajun Bell's littermate brother. Okay. Still pure family, no outs. So he'll be doing that one. I think she's in heat right now, and he's in Canada, and he was telling me about it. They were going to do the breeding. And then one of my guys in Louisiana, he's breeding Cajun Bell's son, who's by OG Ruger, to Ivy, who was by OG Scooby. So again, another pure breeding with no outs. And those are on different yards. So between the Canada, Louisiana, and my yard, those are all the same family, same dogs, but maybe a little different. And then we'll do those breedings. and then we'll try to either trade or get them in the right hand so we have access to them. And then after that, the question is, how much more pure do I get? Because now my dog's traits are locked in a pure form. So now where do I take it? Is like, how do I make them better? Where do I take it? So this is now where I start blending in the Mayday blood or the Chinaman blood or the Red Boy blood to take it to another level. Because now I'm adding more genes to my gene pool that my current pure dogs don't have. So we're producing dogs now that have that finishing ability, hard mouth, very athletic, uh, and just a little bit of out is crazy. How just a little, like a quarter or an eighth out, makes a difference. You can see the difference on that eighth quarter out on the pure stuff, and it's amazing how genetics work. When you start working with a family of dogs and you start playing with your genetics, you think you need a big out to see a difference. No, you don't need a big out. You just need a little out, and that little out can make a difference in your dogs, and you can see it. You can see that difference between the pure stuff and the stuff with a little out. And I remember talking to a cat, years ago. He was telling me in his hog hunting dogs, he only liked to keep a quarter Chinaman in it. And I was like, why? He goes, I only need that little bit of mouth. He goes, he was breeding Jeep dogs or Jeep Red Boy dogs. He goes, the Jeep Red Boy stuff was giving him the hard scratching game, high prey drive dogs. He only needed about a quarter out of heavy mouth, which is going to be Chinaman, Eli, or alligator. And that little quarter out made a difference that he was creating winning hog hunting dogs. And I was like, okay, yeah, I see that. You don't need more than a quarter out of mouth? He goes, no. He goes, a little quarter out, you get a heavy mouth. I see that. Okay. I see that in my dogs that at a quarter out, I still have mouth. When I get to like an eighth or 16th out, like in the Chinaman, I do see they don't bite as hard as the pure Chinaman. So there's a good clear sign in your dogs when you're working them. You can say, okay, I see the difference between a quarter out and eighth out versus a pure Chinaman. At a quarter out, I still got that Chinaman mouth. At an eighth out, they're not biting as hard. And then when you get like a 16th out or 132nd out, you probably need to add more of the hard mouth back into them. Okay. Because that's what happens. But if you keep like a quarter, eighth out and you want heavy mouth, that's all you really need to keep that heavy mouth going. Let's see. All family reds are very smart, man. I'll tell you that they're like human smart. And I think when you're breeding true, okay, and let's take a step back in history. The old family reds in the story of Ferguson Centipede, he was human smart. And that was what those old family reds were known for. Very high intelligence. They were actually like family dogs that you could take out and go match. And there's stories of Bob Hempfield back in the day that he would bring a station wagon of like, I don't know, 5, 6 dogs. And he'd keep them loose in the station wagon. And he would take them to matches. And he would pull out each dog, match it, clean it up, pull it back in the station wagon. And his dogs never fought with each other, but they would win in the pit. And that was a clear sign of intelligence, what those dogs are known for. But if you read the story of Ferguson Centipede, whether this is true or exaggeration, they said Ferguson Centipede could go get you a beer out of the ice chest and bring it to you. That's how smart he was. They said he was very, very intelligent dog. So if you're breeding true to the old Leitner, Hempfield dogs, I think intelligence is probably the strongest trait in them. And I see that these dogs, the pure stuff, the heavily pure stuff, very, very smart, intelligent dogs. And I think that's what makes them good for hog hunting or hunting. They're very, very intelligent. When you get into the other lines, and I'm not saying they're not intelligent, but some of the other lines are one dimensional, that they only have one thing on their mind. You can't take them hunting, that they're going to hit everything that they get at. They're just fight crazy. But a good intelligent dog knows like when to work and when to shut it down. Has nothing to do with gameness, because gameness can only be tested uh, when it's time to see if they quit or not. And when these switches go off in these old family reds, many of them will take their death. They won't quit, but they may not bother another dog unless a dog bothers them. So you could see that, like you could raise them around other animals and other dogs, and unless another dog bothers them, like tries to dominate them or tries to bite them or tries to attack them, they probably won't bother them. But I've had pit bulls of other lines that it don't matter. They got one thing on their mind, and that's all they have on their mind. They're just fight crazy. So I think the old family red, when you blend that blood, uh, it now allows you to have a working dog that you can actually do stuff with. But when you flip that switch and ask it to work, it's going to give you everything it has. So that's what I've seen. Oh, let's see. When I guess took some Red Boy Jocko and have been family bred by a long time to he like blood made. I guess it would be maybe like, which direction after. Yeah, I'm playing with. I think every breeder, and I mentor a lot of young up and coming breeders. I talk to a lot of guys. I just give them my opinion, my recommendation. But one of the things I try to advise everybody: don't try to breed like the next guy, because the old timers didn't do that. Every family was unique to itself. They weren't trying to breed the same dogs. They were trying to breed a family of dogs that they can compete and beat another family of dogs. So some dogs were known for deep gameness and win and intelligent. A different breeder might have said, "No, I want hard mouth. I want finishing ability. I want something that's going to get in there quick, hard, and fast and out." Okay, so they weren't really trying to breed the same dogs. So one of the things I tell some of the young breeders up and coming: have your vision and put your own stamp on the dogs. Get the ingredients. Okay, if you like Red Boy Jocko, you like Chinaman, you like Alligator, you like Old Family Red Nose, whatever it is, Bolio, Tombstone Bolio, get your ingredients and then have a vision, know what each one of those families bring to the table on the traits they're going to bring, and then you start blending them together. Okay, some of the stuff maybe is not popular because it hasn't been proven yet, but you can be on the forefront of creating a new family, a new strain of dogs that no one's thought about yet. Okay. So I started playing with the three-way cross on the Chinaman, Old Family Red, Mayday blood, and we're getting a lot of success. Okay. A lot of success off that. And most people would think, oh, well, you're scatterbreeding those dogs. Well, not really. There's three pure families because I use the pure Chinaman line. OG Knox was off chemo, bred back to chemo's daughter, and he was bred to some of the pure old family reds, like some of Ruger's pups were Ruger bred back to his mom. So we had two pure lines there, and we created the Chinaman old family red, and then we added the Michael Myers blood. He was bred. He was probably one of the tightest bred Mayday dogs I saw. It was Mayday and his sister Dragon Lady, and then he had the out on the Grand Champion Buck. So when you start looking at the genetics, it really is not an out. On the pedigree, you think, oh, okay, in the first 3-4 generations, it looks scatterbred. But you got to remember, Chinaman, Eli, Mayday have high percentages of Carver blood. all the same Carver dog. You go far back enough, you're going to see a lot of Carver blood in the Chinaman dogs. You're going to see a lot of Carver blood in the Mayday dogs. Um, so the reason I did it was because I felt the Carver blood in Mayday was going to click with the Carver blood in the Chinaman dogs. Okay, and so that was my thinking. When you look at the old family Reds genetics, the Carver dogs have high percentages of Leitner blood through the Williams dogs. Okay, through Carver's Black Widow and Carver's Judy. You'll see that in Boomerang and Bolio and all those Carver dogs, old Carver dogs. So when I'm basically, it's not really an out because genetically, my pure old family Reds, the OG Loco dogs, have high percentage of Leitner dogs in them. So genetically, the Leitner blood in the pure stuff should click with the Leitner blood in the Carver dogs. That was the thinking. So they're clicking for some reason. We're getting very good working dogs off the three-way cross on the Mayday old family Red Chinaman. It's clicking, man. We're getting like Little Wayne's showing great. Some of the other ones we did showed real great. They're just earlier starters, harder biting, more serious, straightforward dogs. Some of the pure stuff you're going to have to sit on because genetically you get what you call inbreeding depression if you breed too tight. That the dogs take a little longer to mature. They don't work at a high level. But when you do an outcross, you get hybrid vigor, so you get a better dog than the mom and dad. So that's the reason why you add new genes is you get a catalyst that by adding the new genes that it clicks and the pups are better than both the mom and dad. And that's how you get aces. That an ace typically has no weakness because it has the strengths of 3 different families. And you're going to use one family that's deep game with long wind, another family that's very intelligent with hard mouth, and another family that's going to be straightforward and finishing ability. And you blend those families together, and hopefully the pups get a little bit of both from those family, and it has no weakness. And that's how you get an ace, a dog that has no weaknesses because it has everything it takes to win in hog hunting. So that's the thinking. Let's see. I was saying something recently about common answers should actually be called common answer preservation. Um, common ancestors in any breeding program, I don't care if you're racing horses, racing dogs, hunting dogs, or working dogs, line breeding has proven that's how you keep your dogs working at a very high level, whether it's preservation or not. You're really, when you look at the American Pit Bull Terrier, you're building on the back of the genetics of fighting dogs, built on the back of fighting dogs, built on the back of fighting dogs. Okay, I don't think that's preservation. That says if you're breeding fighting dogs, then you're going to use fighting dogs to breed fighting dogs. So that's why when you're looking at the American Pit Bull Terrier going back to 1890, it's almost like an upside V. All the game bred pit bulls today are going to go back to a handful of dogs because that's what the breeders did. You're going to have Colby, you're going to have Leitner, you're going to have Shipley, Corcoran, and every generation, you didn't go start off with a new line of dogs. You took a Colby dog, or you took a Leitner dog, or you took a Shipley dog, or you took a Corcoran dog, proven fighting lines, and you built off them. Okay. And that's how you keep your dogs working at a high level because you're using genetics in those dogs that are built on the back of working hunting dogs, hog hunting dogs. Okay. And they're all going to go back to a similar line. And the reason you see all these dogs go back to a handful of breeders is because pit bulls were tested by fire in the pit. So let's just say, I remember this back in the day, Shar-Peis. I remember back in the 80s. Shar-Peis could beat a pit bull. There was a belief that Shar-Peis, Chinese fighting dog, could beat pit bulls in the pit. Well, I'm sure people tried it. It was proven they can't compete with a pit bull. The Tosa could beat a pit bull. No, they're proven they match pit bulls, 40 pound pit bulls into 150-pound Tosas, and Tosa's got their ass kicked. They can't compete with the pit bull. So if early breeders were using different breeds or mixing different breeds to compete with American Pit Bull Terriers, those lines did not last because it was a gambler's game. So let's just say I want to breed fighting dogs. Let's say we're back in the early days when it was fighting. I want to breed fighting dogs, but I really like bloodhounds or a hound. I think those hounds, crossed in my fighting blood, I'm going to get something that's going to win. Okay, let's just say someone did. I believe some people have done that. Well, you can take it out. I'm going to bet a couple grand on it, and you lose your money. You're just throwing your money away. That's how weeding out the weaker strains of pit bulls by fire in the pit, why they all go back to just a handful of dogs, because other strains could not compete with these family of dogs. Okay, that is what makes the pit bull different than most other breeds, is because these dogs were culled by the pit and they were betted on. So if you're a betting man, you want to take something you can win with. You don't want to take something just to prove a point, because there's plenty of people that'll take your money. There's plenty of people, sure, dude, yeah, bring whatever you got. You want to throw a couple grand away, and people will play you that way. But if you really are serious about this and you want to get into competing and money's behind it, hog hunting, you definitely want to take dogs that can compete. And this is, people always ask, well, why'd you add Red Boy? Why'd you add Chinaman? Why'd you add Mayday to your Royal Family Reds? Because my dogs hunt hogs, and they hunt against other strain of dogs. They compete with them hog hunting. I needed dogs to at least give my dogs a chance to compete at that level. Okay. I wasn't trying to prove a point. I was trying to prove if I'm going to breed a better dog, then I need to use those lines of dogs and blend them into my family that are working at the top of the game, top of the hog hunting game. And that's why I chose Mayday, Chinaman, Alligator, Red Boy Jocko, Tombstone Bolio, and Jeep Red Boy Rascal. I blended into my whole family. Now I have an OG Loco dog that has the same genes and same traits as these other families, just blended into my OG Loco dogs. And now they have a chance to compete at that level. I'm not looking to prove a point. I was looking, I want the best working dogs possible. And I'm looking at the best lines to complement my OG Loco dogs, if that makes sense. Okay. Let's see what else we're doing now. I guess took some, let's see, Greek to me, way above my pedigree, but sounds like you really got to study your pedigrees to see how they are top and bottom. Is it local and they working on a pack and a hog and there? Yeah, every dog's different. The question is, can OG Loco dogs hunt with other dogs? Not all of them, but some can. Okay. If you're looking, okay, when you're selecting your dogs, if your goal is to breed a hunting dog that can hunt with other dogs and it knows its job, okay, very intelligent. Some of my dogs are very intelligent, that they have tunnel vision on a hog. When they go out hog hunting, they're smelling, they're looking, they want hogs. They block out anywhere else. Okay. And what we saw with OG Ruger, he hunted with a pack of hounds. And the guys that had him said, like, if you didn't hunt Ruger once a month, he'd start fighting with the other dogs. He'd attack the hounds. But as long as you hunted Ruger once a month and he was spending that energy, he left the hounds alone. He didn't bother them. He hunted with them. So what we saw was that energy is going to go positive or negative. If you're working your dogs consistently and you know their job and they're addicted to, like, I want to go hog hunting or I want to go hunting, uh, they know that's their job. They're going to ignore everything else. They're going to go out and hunt. If you don't work your dogs, well, they're going to spend that energy and they're going to start hunting whatever they can get near. And we see that with some of these dogs. We do get dogs that it don't matter, like OG Jew, you could never hunt him with another dog. OG Jew was going to hit any dog he got. And there was no way you could take OG hunting. OG Bull is the same way, his sire. You could not take OG Bull out with other dogs. And I got like a couple dogs here, like I got to hunt them, male, females, especially if they're raised together, they'll get along. But I got some dogs, 2 males, and there's no way I could take them out together. I got some dominant females, 2 females. There's no way I could take them out together. And if they get loose, they're going to hit each other. They're going to go right at each other. But I do got some that are raised together, and a lot of it is intelligence. And that's why I try to take my dogs on walks and hunting together so they learn to feed off of each other. And they know is like, I want you to focus on hunting the bushes and trying to find game versus spending your energy going at it. I tried to take OG Corvino and Serenity out a few months ago. There was no way Serenity was hitting him. I go, I'm not going to fight with these dogs out hunting, trying to break them up. So I don't take Corvino and Serenity out together. I could take Serenity probably with other dogs, but for whatever reason, Serenity doesn't like Corvino and she didn't put up with his crap and she grabbed him. So that tells me I can't hunt those 2 dogs together. So what you're looking for are dogs, one, that have the intelligence and temperament and they know their job, that when you take them out hunting, that's their purpose. And then 2, you're looking for dogs, you want to line them up. So one of the things we saw with OG Ruger was there was always surprised because there was a plot hound that was Ruger would always try to attack him in the back of the truck. Okay. But when they turned him loose, I saw Ruger on the snout of a hog and this plot hound on the leg of the hog they had caught, and Ruger never bothered him. But Ruger hated him in the back of the truck. And that always scratched my head. Why? How did he know the difference? But what we saw with Ruger, he actually listened to the hounds' barks. So he relied on the hounds. He knew when they cornered a hog. He could tell by the change in the bark. You could see his ears going. Okay, he is listening. And as soon as the hounds had a hog cornered, turn him loose, and he hit the hog. He wasn't trying to hit a dog. So, I think every dog's individual, but Ruger is a good example. The type of dogs we were trying to breed is a hunting dog that your job, and that's what you were bred for, and that's what you're used for. That's why hunting dogs, in my opinion, are different than fighting dogs. A good hunting dog, okay? I think Ruger caught about, in his career, 100 hogs. He was catching for a weekend, 2. I think he was catching like 2 Saturday, like quite a few for a couple years. Okay. As a catch dog, the value of his value as a catch dog and pulling down over 100 hogs in his career, versus a match dog that you fight 3 times, maybe 5 at best, 7 if you're lucky, because those dogs, the match dogs, they take so much damage that you're lucky if you get 3 matches out of them. So the value for a good hunting dog, I saw more value in producing game hunting dogs, hog hunting dogs that I could sell to hunters that needed a good catch dog that they were actually out there using, versus selling to somebody that, hey, I'm going to go fight this dog and I'm lucky if I get 1 or 2 matches out of it. And that's the value. So and every breeder's different, and I'm not knocking other breeders. I'm just saying I saw more value in producing a well-rounded game hunting dog that uh, you could do more with and get more out of it in its lifetime as a hog hunting dog. Uh, and then, God, I tried like a good hound or a good jag terrier that's already proven hunting that you could take out and go. Man, you pay money for that. It don't matter if it's papered or not because you're using that dog for hunting. The same thing with catch dogs. If that dog knows its job and it's good at it, that and you're hog hunting or you're hunting with it, that's what you're paying for. You're not paying for the paperwork. You're paying for this dog hunts. That's why I bought him. That's what he's used for. And so anyway, that was the thinking on that. Let's see. Have you ever heard of the buck line called Gaston dogs? Yeah, Gaston dogs are a very good line of dogs. I used to have the Sporting Dog Journal. I used to follow it until the feds raided them, I think in 2005 or six. But I had a Sporting Dog Journal subscription from the early 90s for a long time. So a lot of the famous dogs you see today were advertised in the Sporting Dog Journal. Okay. The Gaston dogs sort of came in. They were some of the first dogs I saw line bred off Grand Champion Buck. Okay. And Gaston went and improved that line off the Buck dog. So let me give you a little history. When I got into the dogs, Jeep was it. If you didn't have a Jeep dog, I mean, this was before Mayday, before Red Boy, before Buck, is the Jeep dogs were the dogs to get. Go to James Crenshaw and Garrett. You wanted a Jeep dog. A lot of those early Jeep dogs, that was it. That's what people were after. All my friends wanted a Jeep dog. And a lot of great producers came off Jeep, like Long's Weirdo, and this is even before they started crossing them with the Red Boy stuff. A lot of the early dogs and the Chance Floyd dogs, and those Jeep dogs. So Buck, even though Buck match, I think it was in '88. I don't think he became a popular stud dog until the '90s. So I remember reading the journal a lot. And it was like, one of the greatest matches in history was Buck and the Sandman. How come I wasn't seeing a lot of Buck dogs? Everyone was still running Jeep, and you would think, wow, this dog, first time two grand champions went at it, and Buck ended up winning. You would think you would see more of the Buck dogs. But it wasn't until like the 90s that you started seeing people line breed off Grand Champion Buck. And then the Gaston dogs were some of the first early Buck dogs I saw that ended up proving themselves. And like, I think Butt Kiss was one of the first ones I saw. But yeah, I really like those early Buck dogs. And then I think Gaston might have been one of the first one to cross the Buck blood on the Grand Champion Yellow dogs that created the Buck Yellow dogs. I think Gaston was one of the early ones. So you will see a lot of that yellow Gaston mixed with the Gaston dogs and created that family of Buck Yellow dogs. So yeah, if you can find some Gaston dogs that, and it's like any line, just because it has Gaston in the pedigree, are the dogs, one, line bred off the Gaston dogs, and two, were held to that high working standard like the Gaston dogs. So they're not just a shell of the Gaston dogs, but they're actually a modern day representation of the old Gaston dogs. And I think that's really the key question anytime you're looking for old blood. Let's see. Can your dogs live inside and still hunt boar as good as your dogs that live on the chain? Do you think living indoors? You know what? We were in this. I'll tell you my thoughts, okay, on that question. So the question is, can a house dog work as good as a dog raised outside on a chain. Okay. Um, I think heart, it doesn't matter. Okay. How the I think if a dog has truly heart and that you're going to take it to the limit, I don't care if it's a house dog or a yard dog. If that dog genetically has heart and it's game, it'll take its death. It doesn't matter. That's the way the dog is wired. That's his genetics. You can't change a dog that's wired that way. Um, so, Lady in Red, let me give you this example. Um, Lady in Red, I got a year ago. I bred her and I gave her to a friend, and then I got her back. And he raised her in the house. She was a house dog. Okay, Lady in Red was a house dog. He raised her in the house with his other dogs, her sons and daughters and stuff like that. And very loving family dog, little soft. She was soft. He had her fat, and I brought her here, and I wasn't sure she was game or not. But the reason I got her, when she hit about 3 years old, 3.5, she killed one of his other pits. So he said, "Look, hey, I can't keep this dog in my yard no more. Do you want her back?" I said, "Yeah, I'll take her back. She was off OG Scooby." Um, so I took her, and I don't know. I started working her. I put her on a chain. In that early, when I first got her, I used to keep her in a kennel. I used to let her run loose, and she didn't bother the other dogs. And then I would put her on the chain, and I started working her on a tug and the flirt pole. She started showing really good mouth, and I brought her weight down, and she started working real good. She was real rough, real rough. Then she started hitting my other dogs. I mean, she was putting work in. So I couldn't let her loose no more. Okay. Within 6 months of me getting her, she went from this fat family house dog that didn't bother nobody to whatever clicked in her. Even though she had killed another dog at his yard, she didn't really mess with my dogs. And then it got to the point like she was hitting my dogs, putting in work on them, and I couldn't let her loose no more. So there's a clear example of a house dog that she was probably already game, but maybe it didn't turn on till she was 3 years old. Whatever her reasoning is, it did not affect her as a game dog. She is a very game dog. She'll put in work, and not only that, she produced game dogs. She has produced some really game hog hunting dogs. So Lady in Red's a clear example of that. So I think the difference between raising them outside and raising them in the house, it's like being raised in the country barefoot versus being raised in the city with shoes on all the time. You know what? Your skin, your feet, you're going to be more tender. Okay, it's not like you're going to be callous to the weather and callous to the ground because you're raised outside. You're going to be a little softer, a little tender, and I think that's what we saw with Lady in Red. That's not to say your heart is that you're not game. It's just that your body's probably not used to the rugged lifestyle. Because I breed hog hunting dogs, I like my dogs raw. I like them rough. I like them to go through the blackberry. I want them out there working. I want them not afraid or crying if they get in bushes and sticks and everything. I like to keep my dogs outside, raised in the environment of a hunting dog, you know. Um, so that's why I do it. And two is I don't have the room to keep dogs in the house. When you're running as many dogs as I have, it becomes more of a management issue of just switching dogs on the chain spot becomes difficult because I got to move this dog here and that dog there and make sure that dog doesn't get loose, and otherwise I have a yard accident. So it's been easier to manage my dogs independently under my supervision than to keep them in an environment where one can get loose or get out. Or I got two dogs that mad dogged each other, and from that day, something went off on them, and I have a problem. So those things happen. So let's see. Yeah, let's see, the piggyback off that Gaston subject would be called the Gaston stuff bred directly to Luther stuff. Both families line bred off their respective family. You know what? I'd have to look at the Gaston pedigree, but what you're looking for is Gaston took dogs right off of Buck and created his family of dogs, the Gaston family of dogs. I think the first one is Champion Butt Kiss, and he was line breeding off of Gaston's Champion Butt Kiss, who was a 4-time winner, 1-time loser, I think. And this is just my memory. He probably did like anyone else, the Gaston family line bred off the early dogs that he got off Buck, like Butt Kiss and everywhere else, and line bred them and started doing sort of similar to what I'm doing now, that you could only go pure so long that you have to add other blood. And that's where probably the Luther stuff might have been added, or definitely the yellow blood was added to loosen up that tight family of dogs. And I believe like my Mayday dogs here, like the Michael Myers stuff, those are really buck dogs bred to the yellow stuff. Okay, so when you look at some of that, they started breeding the pure dogs off Grand Champion Yellow to buck, and that's in some of my dogs I have here, that I have that cross of the yellow buck blood. But my dogs don't have Gaston in them, but they are buck yellow dogs. They have some of those crosses in them. Let's see, anything else? I think I answered most of the questions. Let's see. Reading pedigrees. I mean, let me tell you this story. Not everyone's a breeder, and not everybody should be a breeder. Okay. That should really be left to people that are committed to breeding the best dogs possible and the best in the world. If you're not trying to breed the best dogs in the world, you shouldn't be breeding dogs. You should buy dogs. And I'll give you this example. I have cutting horses, ranch horses, cow horses, and I compete. Sometimes I compete, but I work cattle on them. So I like a good working cow horse, bred to work cattle. You know, you're looking for specific bloodlines. And I did try breeding a couple times, but it's a lot of work, to be honest with you, to, one, to get a good working cow horse, and then to find the right stallion to breed it to, and then that the pedigrees and genetics line up, and hopefully they produce a foal that's better than the parents or as good as the parents, so you have another working cow horse that I could compete with, or I could go work cattle with, because not all horses will work cattle. Not all of them are cow bred. You're looking for a horse that has natural cow instincts. It's going to drop its head. It's going to herd cattle just naturally. It's going to try to cut them. And some of these horses that are bred that way, genetically are natural that way. They're already line bred to work cattle. Okay. So I'm thinking now, okay, I need to buy another horse, and my horse is like in her 20s, and I like to get another cow horse. Do I breed her? I tried breeding her. You know what? At this point, I'm not a breeder. I'm just going to spend the money and buy me a good working cow horse, something like that's already bred. I could go to a reputable breeder, and I could get what I want, or the type of horse I want, versus trying to breed one. I could just go buy one. Okay, save me time and energy. So I think when you're dealing with breeders, not everyone should be a breeder, but go to the best breeders if you want a good dog. Okay. And it's the same logic. Not everybody wants to be a breeder, or not everybody should be a breeder. But if you just want a good hunting working game dog, go to a breeder that breeds that way, and you're going to get a good hunting working game dog. And you're going to save yourself time and money, because you're going to somebody that specializes them. They're going to know the pedigree. They're going to know the genetics. They're going to be building a family of dogs. They're going to be testing and working and hunting those dogs. And a lot of this is foreign to us. To say everything I know now, I knew when I was 21 years old and I started breeding is a lie. I didn't know. I couldn't read a pedigree. I couldn't tell you genetics. I couldn't tell you family of dogs. What I can tell you over 35 years, I've gained a lot of experience. I've made a lot of mistakes, but I've learned from those mistakes and applied it to my program to now I have some knowledge that I can share with people. And hopefully people could take what they learn from me and apply it and build off it. And that's how breeding goes. You build off of the previous generation and you try to do it better. You try to make it better. It's an evolutionary process. Let's see. Anything else? Yes. Any other questions before I bug out? Oh, I didn't mean to talk this long. I need to get back and do more lives. I need to go work my dogs before the day. I still got to mow lawns and work dogs. So maybe I'll cut this short unless there's any other questions. I might do a live working one of the dogs later today, either YouTube or on Facebook. I like to. Some of these dogs need to be worked, so they're going to be real energetic. Part of being a breeder, part of being a dog man, it's your lifestyle. I just love working my dogs. I love hunting with them. I love raising pups. I love working with the older dogs. I like going out there playing tug, flirt pole, hunting, taking them places with me. It becomes your hobby or your lifestyle. Not even a hobby, it's a lifestyle. And then as you get older and you refine what you really like in life, is there's only like 3 or 4 things I really enjoy doing now in life. One is my dogs. That is a mental, emotional, physical release to go mess with my dogs every day. It's part of me that keeps me mentally sound and healthy because I enjoy it. It's a passion. 2, riding my horses, working cow horses, riding my Harleys, and driving my Corvette. Okay. If you ask me anything else out of that, I'm not really into anything outside of those things. So I would have to question, I probably wouldn't be into it, my dogs become a very big part of my daily life of what I enjoy doing. And they help me really stress, deal with this crazy world we deal with. And I block everything else out because I I really try to be honest with people, but I don't give a fuck what anyone else does. I really don't. I don't care. And it's not like I'm indifferent. It's just like I don't have time. I'm dealing with my world, my bubble, which my dogs play a big part of. I don't have time to be worried about what the next person's doing or what the person's not doing and what this person said or this person. It's you don't have time in your day to get caught up in bullshit that has nothing to do with me. Because it doesn't change what I'm doing because I enjoy what I'm doing. It's my life, my choices. So I try to share that with people is when you're committed to a program or a lifestyle, that's your lifestyle. It doesn't matter what other people say. It's like, okay, it's not for you, but it's for me. Bye. Thank you. Have a great life. Because I'm going to keep doing me. I'm going to keep breeding OG Loco dogs. I'm just keep trying to breed the best OG Loco dogs in the world. That is something that's not going to stop. I'll probably do it until I can't do it no more. But, I think that's everything that we need to share with people is just do you, man. As long as you're not hurting other people, or violating their rights or imposing your values on them, just do you. I don't think anyone really cares. Okay, let's see. I think that's it. So next week, I'm going to do a live. I'm going to bring OG Loco's Brindle Bell up. She's really maturing on me. I really like her. She's coming a long way. I want to talk a little bit about her breeding. She's a 3/4 OG Loco blood with the quarter Mayday out on the Michael Myers blood. And I want to talk about her because she's really a beautiful dog. She's really maturing. She's about 14, 15 months now. And talk a little bit about what direction do I breed her in. You know, I have a couple ideas, but I want to share that with people. A lot of this is thinking out loud. Is you think about certain crosses, certain males you want to cross, and it's like playing chess. You got to think about where my dogs will be 5 years from now, based on the breedings I do today. So it becomes very strategic on uh, those crosses and how I'm going to blend it in and how I'm going to cross it. And, you start thinking about that 5 years down the road. So I want to share Brindle Bell, and talk about her a little bit. And hopefully, if the weather's good, I could do this outside and uh, show her. But I think that's it for today. Thank you, everybody, sticking with me. Um, Hopefully you enjoyed this and learned something, and uh, try to chime in on future lives, ask some questions. I'll do my best to answer them, but a lot of this knowledge is now being lost. uh, so we're trying to share that, pass it on to the next generation so people can build off it. So I'm out. Talk to you later. Bye.